Hey, I hope you enjoyed this free lesson from the Bermuda Zoysia Academy on fertilizer. This is one of 17 lessons in the course. The first link in the description below is for the entire course, and there's a 25% off coupon code. So after you enjoy this, go check out the whole course and see if it's a fit for you. All right, guys, welcome to the fertilizer module, I guess we'll call it here. And I've got my friend James Barley on us. Has been on here. If you hadn't watched him yet, he was the guest on the insects as well as the fungus portion. So go check those out if you haven't done so. James is my lawn care mentor, taught me how to get in the weed control and fertilization business. He also sells me my chemicals and fertilizer. He now works for Harold's, but before that, he spent a long time running a large weed control and fertilization business, and also has an agronomy degree. So he's got it covered on all the bases. And this doesn't make James old, but he's literally been doing this since before I was born. So he knows a lot about grass. He likes talking about it like most people like to talk about football. So James, thanks a lot for being on here. And fertilizer, I know even you and I talking before we started recording, it can be complicated, it can be simplified. We try not to do either one. We don't want to go, we're not PhDs here, but at the same time, we want to understand what we're doing. We don't want to overdo something and just throw stuff on the line to make us feel like we're doing something, but at the same time, anyway, so just help us here and what to know and what not to know, and understand that, like there's going to be, as you've told me before, there's more than one right way to do stuff. So it's not like you got like this is the one way you got to fertilize your yard, and anything else won't get you good results. We can go ahead and debunk that. So let's start off. I got some questions here for you, and we can elaborate on these as we need to. But can you help us understand fertilizer? And I put this down because I need to know this too, but this general life cycle of grass, like why, and where I'm getting at is like, why don't we dump fertilizer on the yard in the middle of winter? Why do we do it when it's growing? Why does it use up all these nutrients in one calendar year? And I'm not saying you got to address all those, but you get what I'm saying. Like, what is grass doing? I know I need to eat about 3 times a day to make me feel good. So how often does grass need to eat, and as far as the way it feeds?
Yeah. Let me start before I really answer that to say that watching YouTube, there's so many opinions on fertilizer, and even controversial. And I don't know that it has to be controversial, but some people are so opinionated they make it controversial. There's some people that really believe in one approach, and somebody else just can't believe that anybody would do that, or they don't do that. And so it can get, I don't want whoever's listening to this to get lost in the weeds or to get too deep on it. I want to I heard a guy say, put the hay down where the goats can get it, and simplify this. And I think there's a lot of overthinking on nutrition. Some people talk about all the micronutrients, things like zinc and molybdenum and iron and manganese and some of those things. And I just think, I've seen grass on the median in the right of way that I've never seen any of those nutrient deficiencies. And so it's easy to become I'm going to call them a soil hypochondriac. Like there's just got to be something wrong with my soil. And I think if your lawn is looking pretty good, don't look for a bunch of missing pieces to a puzzle. Take what you've got. If your lawn is looking pretty good, and be simple with it, and don't get too deep with it or controversial with it. I've seen cemeteries that nobody's ever fertilized at all, and they're fully covered, and they mow them and they look nice. Can they look better with some fertilizer approach? For sure. And I think that's what we're doing. We're looking at it from a aesthetic standpoint, but I've never seen a lawn die because it didn't get a nutrient. That's just my experience. Somebody else may have seen that. But I've never seen it just die. So the soil, most soils will produce pretty adequate nutrition, and we're going to add a little bit to make it even better. That's my view of doing this in a Bermuda zoysia context. And a lot of homeowners maybe listen to this, so we're not going to get real deep into the soil chemistry and nutrition and all the biological stuff that's going on down there. I think some of those things make a difference, but I don't think we're going to tackle all that. I would say that during the growing season, a soil nutrition guy, a PhD, told me one time if there's no transpiration, there's no root uptake. Transpiration is moisture coming out of the leaves. The leaves are transpiring. You've probably seen transpiration on your windshield if you're parked under a tree. We see these little dots of sap, and turf transpires too. So that creates the ability to vacuum up, so to speak, water that brings the nutrients in there. And it's amazing what the soil can provide on its own. And that's why you don't see a lot of necessarily symptoms of deficiencies on the side of the road or in the median or in a cemetery that never really has any care. And so again, we're going to keep it very basic. But if there's no transpiration, there's no root uptake. So applying a lot of nutrients in the middle of the winter on warm seasons, say Bermuda and zoysia, a lot of times it can be wasteful, and you will not get an efficient taking up of those nutrients. Even after the lawn greens up in the spring, say it's March and you're beginning to see some color, there may not be an aggressive uptake. I've seen where it greens up and you fertilize and it just doesn't do anything. And you almost have to wait till May to warmer temperatures to really see the fertilizer take effect and give you some visual results from that application. So most universities would recommend waiting till it's pretty warm and you're having to mow the grass before you apply, say, nitrogen, which is the main thing that's going to turn it green. It's going to be the thing that makes it grow and fill in, be thick and pretty, and have a nice color to it. Your lawn will be green without it, but it'll be greener with nitrogen. And you can use too much and waste it. But nitrogen is something that doesn't stay in the soil. And for your lawn to be greener and to grow and fill in and look good, it might need to be replaced every growing season. And in the case of Bermuda and zoysia, that's the late spring and summer.
All right, James, kind of continuing this conversation, but most people know that when you look at a bag of fertilizer or even a liquid fertilizer, it's got 3 numbers on the back. Can you, in simple terms, tell us what those 3 numbers stand for, but maybe also, what each of those do to the lawn or for the turf? And, why is sometimes one number higher than the other, or sometimes the middle number is almost 0 or 0 or real low. And the first one might be higher, the last one higher. So help us understand those 3 numbers.
Yeah. And again, that's debatable and controversial and a lot of opinions on it, but I'm going to try to give you the simplest version of it. The 3 numbers are nitrogen, potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus, and the 3rd number is potassium, sometimes called potash, interchangeably. But we could go into details. I mean, like the potassium's K2O and P2O5 and get into all the deep weeds, but we're not going to do that. So the NPK, let's call it, or the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The nitrogen has a lot to do with just growing leaves, and it'll bring on color. And so color and growth and nitrogen is such an important part of making protein in the plant. And when we eat protein, it's made from nitrogen. The phosphorus, a lot of times, is connected to some of the chemistry going on within the cell. And then it also helps in rooting type things. You'll see some people will elevate the phosphorus when they want to see a lot of rooting, like when you've seeded a grass or sodded a grass, make sure the phosphorus levels are adequate. And then potassium it's important in a lot of ways, but a lot of times it's recognized for cell wall, drought tolerance, winter tolerance, wear tolerance, and that type of thing. I tell you, when my thoughts and some of the soil nutritionists' thoughts are that a lot of times those things are recommended in greater amounts than are necessary. And if you were to do a soil test, a lot of the soil testing data or criteria sometimes maybe was developed back in World War II. I mean, and some of it's outdated, and some of it was connected to like growing hay or feeding cows, putting it in a pasture, because you got a Bermuda lawn, you got a Bermuda pasture. And so a lot of it was based on yield instead of just aesthetics and turf health. We're not trying to get a lot of clippings. We're not trying to bale hay with our lawn. And so a lot of those soil tests may show that they want you to add more when you don't have to. And I sell fertilizer, so but I think there's a lot of wasted effort in putting too much nutrients. And again, there's a lot of debate out there. Some people think you need to saturate the soil with as much nutrition as you can, and there's others that are more minimalist that think, adequate is not as high as you think it is. And so putting NPK down, the phosphorus, the middle number, tends to build up in the soil. So somebody that's used a phosphorus fertilizer, a middle number, year after year after year, may have a pretty high soil test showing real high phosphorus. So it doesn't have to be replaced maybe as much as the nitrogen and potassium. And some soils can hold potassium or yield potassium to the plant. And so nitrogen is the biggest limiting factor of those three as far as turf appearance and growth and how thick and healthy that lawn looks. So I think that's kind of what you're hitting at.
James, I'm in these different Facebook groups, sometimes with lawn care people, and some of, like you said, there's opinionated people. And so some of them's like, we use liquid everything, and it's great to be liquid, and other people use granular. Can you talk about, generally speaking, what's the, not necessarily better or worse, but maybe pros and cons of using a granular versus a liquid? And maybe it's just an observation, but it seems like, particularly with the warm season lawns, most people use a granular. And a lot of times on the cool season lawns, I do seem like more people, I'm not saying more use liquid than granular, but more liquid is used on the cool season lawns than on warm season lawns. Maybe you can speak to that as pros and cons of granular liquid, and why does cool season people seem to use liquid occasionally?
This is just my opinion, but the different growing season that the cool season people have compared to the warm season grasses like Bermuda and Zoysia, it's in cooler weather when those grasses thrive. When you get into really hot temperatures, they don't necessarily push the grass with as much nitrogen or fertilizer as we do in warm season. That's the main time we tend to fertilize and motivate the lawn to grow and to get darker green in color. And so the cooler months, it's easier to spray a liquid and not burn the foliage. So it seems like the saltiness of fertilizer in hot weather in large amounts on a sprayable fertilizer can burn the foliage. I mean, if you get salt in a wound on your hand, it burns, right? Well, you can pull that moisture from a salty type fertilizer, pull the moisture out of the leaf and burn it. Whereas a granular, when applied at the right rate or reasonable rates, that granule, which is also salty, would fall past the foliage and there'd be less chance of burn. So we're fertilizing more in hot weather. The cool season people are fertilizing more in cooler temperatures. And so they can get away with liquid maybe better than we can. Also, in my mind, it seems like cool season grasses can be dark green and pretty with less nitrogen than is required for Bermuda and Zoysia. That's been, I've seen like annual bluegrass or fescue clumps in the winter in a Bermuda lawn as a weed be dark green when I haven't even fertilized them. So the amount of fertilizer that makes them really be pretty and dark may be less than what's required for Bermuda and Zoysia. And so you can put less down without burning the foliage in a liquid. They can still use granular, and you can use liquid in the South on Bermuda and Zoysia, but there's a point where as you're getting enough down in the liquid form to turn things green, you're risking foliar burn. Whereas a granular, you can really stick it to it, make it really turn green and grow and get some recovery from whatever, injury you might have gone through. You can get some recovery and growth in a granular without being concerned about foliar burn when applied at the normal rates.
Is there some truth to, maybe you alluded to this, but like, can you just put more nitrogen out at one time in a granular form than liquid, or you could put more out in liquid? It's just the risk goes up. Is that what you're basically saying?
Yeah, now you're getting into kind of the slow release world. So if you have a slow release type granular product, you could put as much as a whole summer's worth of fertilizer down without being concerned about burning any foliage. Whereas the liquid, I don't know that there's any liquid forms that would last for months. I'm not aware of them. There are some slow release liquids, but as far as making a Bermuda or zoysia lawn look good with one application all summer long, you pretty much got to go granular. And so there's different types of slow release. Most of them are a type of coated fast release with a coat on it that kind of works like a tea bag. It slowly lets the tea come through the bag. This slowly allows the nutrients to come through that coating and feed that lawn over a long period of time, kind of a trickle feed or spoon feed over a long period of time. And most of that, you're pretty much going to have to use a granular form instead of a liquid.
James, you mentioned this, the slow release and fast release, and I buy my stuff from Harold's, as you know, and I, for the most part, buy the slow release fertilizer, and that's one of the things I like about it, just from a practical standpoint. I feel like if I was a homeowner, I would do this as well, but I like that I can just fertilize 1 or 2 times a year, and then I'm good, because I can work on weeds the rest of the time, where on the fast release, you got to do it more often. Again, maybe not necessarily right or wrong, but talk about that. And like, you mentioned the tea bag illustration, but like, can you just address, like, if I went and put some fast release fertilizer out on my yard in February, that's probably not smart, but I could do it. I don't, homeowner might not need to in February, and it could work with a slow release. So talk about the advantages of slow release and the fast release, and we'll get in, practically speaking, like how many times you're going to do it, how much nitrogen it needs, and all that. But maybe just go with a slow release versus fast release, because I think some people in their mind, they just, I know this from talking to customers. When I go out there to talk to a customer, especially on the initial visit with them, and they want to know how many times you're going to fertilize. It's like, well, so-and-so said he was going to fertilize 4 times, and you said you weren't going to do it but twice, and so in their mind, 4 is definitely better than 2. So help address some of that.
Yeah. Well, both fast and slow release will turn the lawn green and make them beautiful. So that's a tie. I think it comes down to convenience and cost, and somebody may have to just, work through that in their mind, what they prefer. If I wanted something to grow real fast, I might use a fast release, because it's can be like drinking water from a fire hose. I mean, its nutrients are saturated in there, and the grass is taking it up in a maximum form, and you're getting quick results. But those results don't last long. That lawn may only be darker green than an under fertilized lawn or a non-fertilized lawn. Maybe that fast release may look green for a month. So if you put a slow release down, you could go like 20 weeks of color, just continually releases fertilizer over those 20 weeks and keeps the lawn green as if you're doing multiple fast released applications. So I think it's a convenience thing. If I was a homeowner, I just would not be fired up about spreading multiple times. I would want to do it once. It's also, the slow release is a little safer. The burn potential is much lower. If you were to go a little heavy with a fast release, you could get some root burn or something like that. You almost have to spill it really to get into trouble like that. But there's a safety factor in going with a slow release. There's a convenience factor of not having to spread more than once or maybe twice. instead of having to do multiple fast release, even though the fast release per bag may be cheaper than that slow release. So I think it's a personal preference there. Both of them will produce the color and growth and make happy campers out of lawn owners.
One thing you taught me was, the grass you talk about drinking out of a fire hydrant, the grass can only take up so much nitrogen. So you can't just take this fast release and say, I want to be super green, so I'm just going to triple the rate or whatever, because it can only use what it can use. And after that, you're basically risking burning the yard or just wasting nutrients. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it used to be, I would say, maybe in the 60s and 70s, there wasn't much of any slow release. It was all fast release. And so that generation, they were used to applying things like ammonium nitrate or fertilizers that had ammonium sulfate. These are fast working. And when they applied it, and the bags were cheap back then, so they could fertilize their lawn for $5, kind of thing, and turn it just really dark green. And a lot of people love that real dark color that they could get from ammonium nitrate and some of those kind of products, but it didn't last long. They'd have to redo it if they were going to keep that color all summer long. And then, so when the slow release came out years later, and that older generation was comparing it to that really dark green that they liked. And I think that generation is gone, and people are more content with just a good emerald green color. It doesn't have to be that darkest dark green. And almost everybody that likes it really dark green is probably in their 70s or 80s, because they saw what those old fast release fertilizers could do. But I think the new generation and the homeowners of today are content and are happy with a good steady medium to dark green, not that black green kind of color. And most of that can be achieved with a slow release fertilizer, and it's safer, lasts longer, and it doesn't waste it. It doesn't allow as much leaching or waste of the nutrients, because the plant can only take up so much at a time. So it's kind of like drinking water from a fire hose. You'll get some water, but a lot of it's going to go past your head, right?
James, specifically talking about Bermuda and zoysia lawns, we can take those one at a time if you want to, but how much fertilizer do we need? So if we, maybe talk about if I'm putting down a slow release, like how much do I put out? And if I'm putting down a quick release, how much do I put down when I'm doing it?
Yeah. A lot of the soil test recommendations may still be about fast release fertilizer. And I don't think they've really integrated slow release and their recommendations for slow release, because you can get by with less slow release and get the same, because it's not wasting as much nutrition. The plant is getting to take it all, most of it in, instead of a lot of it being wasted. And so on Bermuda, a real slow release, you could probably do 2 pounds of nitrogen, actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. And I don't want to get too complicated with it, but if you had a fertilizer that was like a 20-0-10, that 20% of 50 pounds, there would be 10 pounds of nitrogen. So that bag would cover 10,000 square feet if you put down 1 pound. So you're talking about putting 2 pounds in a year of slow release is plenty. Even less than that with zoysia. Now that's slow release. So some soil tests may recommend as much as 3 or 4 pounds of nitrogen for Bermuda, because you're having to reapply and it's wasting a lot of it because it can't take it all in when you apply at a pound at a time, pound of nitrogen at a time. And again, I don't want to get too complicated. I may already be too complicated for some listeners. But zoysia, and what I would suggest would be to do 2 pounds of fast or slow per 1,000 square feet per year, and see how you like that. Is that green enough for you? I mean, there's a wide span of what can make you happy. Some people are okay with just a moderate green, and some people are willing to mow every 3 or 4 days and want it real dark green. So find out where that landing spot is, but it could be anywhere from 2 pounds of nitrogen per year per 1,000 square feet up to 4 on Bermuda. Some research has shown on zoysia that when you exceeded 2 pounds, you started getting decline, started getting disease. It just started looking bad. It went in a negative direction instead of a positive direction. So Bermuda could keep looking better and better with that additional nitrogen up to some point, whereas zoysia, when it hit 2 pounds, started going south. And zoysia you can't push it with fertilizer. It'll only respond to so much. And I would limit that to 2 pounds. In the case of a real slow release, maybe even a 1.6 pounds, 1.7 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 per year.
James, you were sort of describing how to calculate it, and this is on our question list, but can you talk about, let's say a person's got a 10,000 square foot yard for a good round number, and they bought a 50-pound bag of fertilizer. Could you maybe go through that math one more time? And they're going for 2 pounds, let's just say. So how does that math work? Please talk through that slowly so they can understand that.
Yeah, let me make it even easier with 1 pound, like you're going to do a 1 pound application. And so the first number, which is nitrogen, that's the percent of that bag that is actual nitrogen. So if you had a 20-0-10, say, you take that 20 and divide it by 2, because it's a 50-pound bag. If it was a 100-pound bag, it would be 20% of 100, which would be 20 pounds in there. But this is a 50-pound bag, so you cut that in half. So there's 10 pounds of nitrogen in that 50-pound bag of 20-0-10. And so if you had 10 pounds in there and you got a 10,000 square foot lawn, so there's 10 1,000s in that size lawn, that bag should cover perfectly that 10,000 square feet lawn. You got 10 pounds, you're putting 1 pound per 1,000, and there's 10,000s out there to treat. So is that kind of what you're getting at there?
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to go 2 pounds per 1,000, you're essentially going to double it. So that bag would cover 5,000 square feet.
That is correct. That is correct.
That was good round numbers, but the math works if your yard was 6,500 square feet and you're using it's the same math. But those numbers are as a percentage of the blend. So
yeah, the simple way to do it is to know how many pounds you're going to put out, and the number of pounds in that bag is half of that first number.
Yeah, if it's a 50-pound
bag. That's
right. And these questions do in some ways tie together, but we talk about slow release, we talk about fast release, we talk about how much fertilizer, and this to round out the equation here, how many times should I fertilize my yard? So, and obviously that's going to vary depending on the other answers we've already given, but maybe based on what you've already said, can you finish the thought here and help them bring it home?
Yeah, again, this is Bermuda zoysia, and I think people's taste is different. When I was in the lawn care business, we had people, we would make the lawns look really green. I mean, you could drive down the street and boy, that's a green lawn. And some of the customers would call and say, look, please stop. I can't keep up with the mowing. So I think there's a broad range of what people are happy with, that happy medium between what it looks like, how dark it is, how many clippings how often they're having to mow it. So I think there's a range instead of a perfect number to do. But I think on average, for it to use fast release, I think maybe 2 to 3 times a year, putting down a pound of nitrogen per time, making those about 6 weeks apart during the growing season. Again, this is Bermuda zoysia. 2 applications, a pound each, would be great for zoysia. You might do a third one to make it 3 pounds for Bermuda if it's fast release. In the case of slow release, where it's got a lot of slow release, now some products may say contains slow release, but only 10% of it or 20% of the nitrogen is slow. The rest of it's fast. So it's almost like you might as well call it a fast release because there's just not that much slow release in there. But if there's a lot of slow release in there, then you could apply possibly just one time. Do that in May when the grass is growing. You need to mow it. It's no frost, and the grass is taking up the nutrition. You might put 2 pounds, 2.2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 and do that in one spread and not have to fertilize it the rest of the growing season.
James, on the equipment that you've seen people use, and I'll have I think there'll be a module on here talking about equipment, and I can show some different things. But um, obviously, a lot of the guys out doing for a living now, like me, we're riding on machines, which is great. But for a homeowner, what are the push spreaders and chest spreaders and stuff? Are you familiar with those? What kind of recommendations do you have or thoughts on those?
Yeah. I've used both. I've used a push spreader. I have one of those, and a chest spreader where you put the strap around your neck, kind of like the organ grinder kind of thing, and spread from there. I've done both of those. I think both can work. I think you can store a chest spreader better than you can park a push spreader that's got wheels and handlebars. You got to have room to store that. And if you're using it twice a year, it's a big machine to only use twice a year, but a lot of people have those, and they make real small ones that you can buy in the box stores and so. But the idea is to spread at a rate and a distribution that the lawn gets even coverage. And so if you were to be too strong in one area, and then your next row is too far over, you would stripe the lawn up. So the idea is to uniformly spread the recommended amount of granular fertilizer without striping up the lawn or having light and dark spots. So if you can achieve that, and I know you do a lot of chest spreader work, especially in small lawns where you can get in there and get out pretty quick. If somebody learns to do that evenly, and this is a good spot to say this. When you're standing ready to start spreading, you're at the end of a row and you're standing and you turn the spreader on, whether it be the chest spreader or the push spreader, it's throwing it out in front of you. So where you're standing is not going to get any fertilizer, because when you start, it's maybe 4, 5, 6 feet out in front of you. So remember, where you're standing is not going to get any fertilizer. And so you've got to cover those spots too, not just when you get to the driveway or the neighbor's yard, stop. But when you turn around, you've got to start at the edge of your lawn and not be standing on the edge of your lawn necessarily where you're going to throw the fertilizer several feet out in front of you. So both of those, in both cases, back to putting it down evenly, even where you're standing. So you may have to spread where you're standing a little bit, then stand in it, and then start the row. I don't know how you do it, but make a quick turn and get into the row. You might mention how you do it.
Most people do like a perimeter pass all the way around, or even 2 perimeter passes, and then you can go back and forth, and your where you made the perimeter pass is your room to turn around and get.
That's right.
Most of them don't whip around fast enough to not leave a little teardrop shape that you missed.
Yeah. Well, the idea though is, regardless of which spreader you're using, the idea is to put the right amount of product evenly distributed on the lawn so it responds evenly, instead of dark here, light there, where you miss some spots, and that could look worse than if you've not fertilized it.
All right, and last question here, and just put it as clear as you can as far as a plan for somebody. If this is the only question they watch the whole time and they just want to know, hey James, what do I do? Just say, hey, here's a plan you could use. You could go buy this blend and put it out this calendar month at this rate, and that would work, or maybe give them another option.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to be real general and leave you with some thoughts that you can apply and come up with that plan. But let me say this: there's some fertilizers that are what we call high analysis. Like it may have the first number nitrogen may be 38 or 36, but it's a real concentrated amount of fertilizer, and you use a lot less of it. So that bag has a lot more nitrogen in it than, say, a 20 in the first number. And so for a homeowner or the people that are not experienced, I would recommend using something in the 20s. It could be even lower than that. It could be 18. But if you're less likely to overdose the lawn with a lower analysis nitrogen, whereas the professional may go with a 35, 38% nitrogen because he does this over and over and over again, he or she. and that bag's going to go farther for him or her because not as much of that is needed. It's so concentrated that bag goes farther. So if you were to use a highly concentrated, high analysis nitrogen fertilizer and you use the whole bag on, you used it up on half the lawn, you just overdosed part of the lawn and didn't make it to the rest of the lawn. So I like something in the 20s, maybe even 18 or something like that. So let me throw one out there, like a 20-010, a 25-012, something like that, where I want it to where it only has 10 or 12 pounds of nitrogen. So that one bag would do a 10 or 12,000 square foot lawn. It has about half or less of the amount of potassium, that's the last number, as the first number. 20-010, that's half. 25-012, that's a little less than half. It could be a 25-08, which is maybe close to a third of the amount of potassium. And I'm going to start with no phosphorus, no middle number. In fact, some states regulate the amount of phosphorus you can put down, and some of them maybe will not allow you to have a middle number or put any phosphorus down without a soil test proving that you need it. Okay, so be sure to check your state's regulations. I know Florida has some of those. I don't think Alabama does. I'm not sure about some of the other states. But something like a 20-010, I might, if it's fast release, I might apply that a bag per 10,000 square feet twice a year, about 6 weeks apart. I would start in late April or May. I want it to be warm enough that the grass is growing and I need to mow it, not still cold at night and the grass is, it may have greened up, but it's just sitting there not doing much. So I'm going to take advantage of when it grows because it will take up the fertilizer more efficiently when it's actively growing. So that would be my plan. If it's a real slow release, and I'm not sure how many of the long-term slow release are available to the homeowner, possibly get some online. But if it said 20-week fertilizer or, 22-week fertilizer or 19-week fertilizer, I would probably apply that in May and see how far it goes. And I'd probably, in the case of Bermuda and Zoysia, not exceed 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet in that one spread. That would be my plan.
Yeah, and I guess on the Bermuda, if you did that and it wasn't green enough about August, you could top it off with some fast release or whatever to make it greener if it wasn't green, if you didn't mind mowing regular.
And I think you look at what you did in one year, and if you're happy with it, repeat it. And if it was not as green as you wanted it to be, and you knew the rainfall and irrigation was adequate, then you may say, well, this year I'm going to go, instead of 2 pounds, I'm going to go 2.2 in the case of Bermuda. Or I might even push my spread later in May and not be back up toward cool weather so much, so that it still looks good in August.
I like that though. You don't want to make the extreme adjustments like people that might live in my house with the thermostat. They're a little bit cold and it's on 70. You go to 72, not 86. And just make extreme adjustments with your plan. Like, hey, modify gently. So
let me say this as to that the cool season market. If you live in Nashville or Missouri, Ohio, Indiana, and you've got fescue or Kentucky bluegrass, we're talking about a whole different world of nutrition, a whole different amount, a whole different timing. So this is a Bermuda Zoysia recommendation or suggestion, and it would be really different to bring, and not good to bring these thoughts into a cool season market. Even like extreme North Alabama and Atlanta can have cool season grasses. So this would not be the best information for you of what we talked about fertilizer wise.
Thanks, James. Let's move on to the next video. I hope you enjoyed this free lesson from the Bermuda Zoysia Academy. If you're interested, you can go down to the first link in the description below. There's a 25% off coupon, and this is one of 17 lessons in the course. This is the course that James and I put together. You can see about the Academy, the different lessons on here. You get a Bermuda full program and downloadable worksheet for that, a Zoysia program, and we go over this in detail on video, recommended herbicides, spot treating weeds, understanding fertilizer, which you just watched, insects, fungus, watering and mowing, difficult weeds, equipment, calibration and mixing, spraying, spreading, problem lawns, and final thoughts to give you some encouragement. These are all covered in video on the course. I think it would be really helpful for those that are looking to know what the pros do to have a great Bermuda or Zoysia lawn. First link in the description, get the discount code and check out this course.